Hello, I'm Jonathan from Boom Instructor Training. As we come to the end of 2025, let's have a recap over the major DVSA changes that affect PDIs, ADIs and learner drivers. There's been a lot happening this year, so let's go through everything that's changed in 2025 and what we can expect in 2026 so we can all stay fully up to date. This is quite a long video packed with lots of relevant information, so please get comfortable, put your feet up and let's go through everything. And because there's lots of information in this video, then I will be looking down and referring to some notes because it's just too much for me to memorize. One of the big changes this year is the update to the practical driving test, which officially rolled out nationwide on the 24th of November 2025. The test hasn't been completely redesigned, but there's a few important adjustments that you need to be aware of. Now, the key points are there's been slight route adjustments at most test centres. So the test routes will include more high speed and high risk areas where location allows. And this gives learners the opportunity to face a broader range of driving scenarios. There will be longer periods of independent driving, so the independent driving segment of the driving test, and this can either be following sat-nav, traffic signs or both, can now run for the full duration of the test. And the idea behind this is to give learners more time to demonstrate their ability to follow directions independently, just like they would after passing their driving test. There will be fewer routine stops at the side of the road, so the number of stops during the test has reduced from 4 down to 3. And the emergency stop has been reduced from 1 in 3 tests to just 1 in 7 tests. And DVSA say that by reducing the number of routine stops and emergency stop exercises, the test should feel more like a genuine drive. So for you, this means updating your lesson planning and mock test structure so you give your learners more practice with longer stretches of independent driving. So what do you think about all of this? Do you think these changes are a good idea or an unnecessary change? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Another big change in 2025 is the way that driving tests are booked. The DVSA have now introduced new rules that mean only learners themselves can book or manage a driving test. So this means no more instructor bookings. So if you normally help your pupils by booking tests for them, well, you can't do this anymore. The pupil will need to make their own booking, but at least you can still manage when you're available for driving tests. So you can tell DVSA when you're never available or when you're temporarily away. So you'd need to sign into the .gov website through the government gateway page to do this. So what do you think about this? A lot of ADIs have always preferred to book driving tests for their pupils. Will this change affect your business model? Do you think this change was necessary or unnecessary? Let me know in the comments what you think. So also, as part of these new booking rules, there's no third-party booking services, no bots or resellers jumping the queue, and there's a limit on how many times a test can be moved or rescheduled. A learner can only make 2 changes to their driving test booking, including moving or swapping dates and changing location. And they'll also be restricted to a limited number of test centres where they can book their driving test, which will be located close to the original booking. And any more than 2 changes to their driving test, then the test must be cancelled or rescheduled. And the idea behind all of this is to shut down the black market reselling of test dates and to reduce speculative bookings. The average waiting time for a car practical driving test is 22 weeks, and this can be even longer in some areas. So the government is bringing in 36 Ministry of Defence driving examiners to try to cut the backlog. And these examiners are expected to deliver 6,500 additional driving tests throughout the next year. Using Ministry of Defence driving examiners is only temporary. It's expected to last about 12 months, and it allows test centres to run additional tests in high demand areas. It won't fix things overnight, but you might notice test slots becoming more readily available throughout 2026. Let's talk about test slots for ADI Part 2 and Part 3. Now, the last published figures that I could find was for 2024, and there was around 4,000 trainees waiting on hold for Part 2 and Part 3 tests, and nothing has really changed in 2025, so I think it will be a similar picture now. Now, this delay is partly because some of DVSA's examiners who are responsible for Part 2 and Part 3 tests are now being used to help with the backlog of learner tests. So this is removing them from doing Part 2 and Part 3 tests and standards checks. Now, I just don't think that the DVSA has ever really managed to catch up after the massive bottleneck created by all of the lockdowns in 2020 and 2021. And these long waiting times simply didn't exist before these lockdowns. A big worry for PDIs is the fixed 2-year qualification period. PDIs have 2 years from passing Part 1 to then pass Part 2 and Part 3. A lot of ADIs and PDIs think that this 2-year period isn't fair anymore because of the long waits for test. Now, this was actually raised in Parliament earlier this year, back in April. So an MP called Will Forster in Parliament back in April asked the Secretary of State for Transport what steps her department is taking to increase the availability of approved driving instructor tests, and if she will make it her policy to temporarily extend the 2-year qualification period applicable after passing Part 1 of the ADI qualification process. So a response was given by an MP called Lillian Greenwood, and this was on the 2nd of April this year, and this is what she said. She said, "The Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency understands that waiting times remain high for approved driving instructor tests and has a rolling programme of recruitment and training for ADI examiners. Since December 2024, the DVSA has also made available weekend slots for ADI Part 2 and Part 3 tests. When managing the book to hold list, DVSA's deployment team will look at Part 1 expiry dates to help prioritise trainee driving instructors whose expiration date is approaching. The legislation requires that a Part 3 test is booked, not taken, before the expiry of the Part 1 test. The DVSA has put measures in place to support candidates whose Part 1 pass is due to expire by allowing them to book a Part 3 test online, or if no tests are available, they can book a test to hold. Both these options meet the regulatory requirements. The 2-year qualifying period is set in legislation and there are no plans to extend this." So if you are a PDI, then providing you book your Part 3 test before the 2-year period expires, you will still be able to take your Part 3 test even if the test date is beyond this 2-year period. In terms of standards checks, if you're an ADI, I doubt you'll be having a standards check anytime soon unless it's triggered. For example, if your pass rate is less than 55% within a 12-month period. I personally know ADIs who qualified 5 or 6 years ago, and they haven't even had their first standards check. So there must be many thousands of ADIs all around Britain who are technically due for a standards check simply because they haven't had one for several years. Will DVSA ever catch up with standards checks? Let me know what you think in the comments. The DVSA has tried to recruit and retain examiners throughout 2025. This is all part of the wider project to bring waiting times down to more acceptable levels. DVSA figures show that 668,128 people had a practical test booked in Britain as of the end of September 2025. That's a lot of people waiting for driving tests. Now, Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander said back in April that her department aimed to reduce the average waiting time for driving tests to just 7 weeks by the summer of 2026. Is this possible? I will believe it when I see it. This year, DVSA has recruited 316 new driving examiners. Well, that sounds pretty good, but 276 examiners left. So it's only a net gain of 40 new examiners. So that's not great considering how many people are waiting for driving tests. One reason DVSA are finding it difficult to recruit examiners is because of what they get paid. Examiners get paid about £29,500 per year. Well, the average UK salary is apparently about £39,000. So this is probably why DVSA struggle to recruit and keep examiners. For a lot of people, the salary isn't very appealing. So, to encourage driving examiners to stay in their job or delay retirement, current examiners will receive an extraordinary retention payment of £5,000. So, what does all of this mean for you right now? Well, I'd recommend that if you're going through the process of becoming an ADI, be patient, accept it could take the full 2 years to qualify. It's very possible to do it much sooner than that if things go your way, but in some cases it will take the full 2 years. And make sure you're very well prepared for the Part 2 and Part 3 tests. I'd recommend that you check out my website. I have some excellent Part 2 and Part 3 online courses. I'd also recommend that you update your pupils because they need to know that they've got to book their own driving tests. Also, review your lesson planning to match the new driving test changes. And also look out for any extra slots where MOD examiners are being deployed. If you found this video helpful or interesting, then please give it a like. I've got some great videos planned for 2026, so please do subscribe to this channel so you don't miss them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in 2026.